Okay, I'm ready. All right, folks. So my name is Craig Campbell. I'm a manager here with Mathers Realty, and so tonight I'm speaking on the subject of negotiating repairs. Okay, so whenever you do a deal, the one thing that you know is you negotiate that deal twice. You negotiate to get the contract, but you also negotiate again toward the end of that due diligence period in order to renegotiate terms based on the investigations that you found. Okay? And so we're going to talk about things that may come in the inspection report and some of the things that can be done. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to negotiate repairs. We're going to talk about how to create a possible win-win solution for everybody involved, okay? And how to prepare a due diligence repair request, which is what you have in that document. It's very, very important. The wording of that is extremely important, okay? Okay, so after you got the contract, you've got your inspection done, now you receive the inspection, and there are things that you really need to do with your buyer and seller prior to, and these are jewels that you should drop during the entire transactional period, okay? Is you have to prepare your buyer for the results. For example, if you have a house that was built in 1939, the chances are there may be foundation issues. But is that a deal breaker for a house that was built in 1939? Not really. If you buying a property in North and South Carolina, there's a strong possibility that at some point there's been evidence of termites. If it's been treated, it may not be a deal breaker. And so you have to kind of continue to drop those little gems to help them not panic whenever they see the results. Because here's what you have to remember. You have an inspector that you just paid about $600. And he, of course, wants to make himself and his company look good. And he's going to find everything that he can think of to put in that report sometimes, okay? And oftentimes, an inspector can just scare a buyer or a seller so bad that they don't want to buy the home. Now, who actually owns the inspection? The inspection actually belongs to the buyer. But in order to be effective, once you've gone over that report, you need permission from that buyer to share that information with the seller. Why? Because we're going to submit a list of things that need to be done, but the seller needs a point of reference, okay? He needs to be able to look at this and be like, yeah, and he looks over at this inspection, that probably needs to be done. In fact, there are some things that may be a material fact, okay? If it's a material fact, he's going to need to fix it anyway, but he needs to see some type of evidence that this is occurring, okay? And if it's in the inspection report, it's a material fact, it has to be disclosed on the MLS and publicly, okay? So the buyer does own the inspection. I paid for it, it's mine, that's how buyers feel, but you have to explain to them how important it is for them to share the inspection report. That way you can get, your negotiation done. Okay? So, the inspection is complete. We talked about that. So you're going to review that inspection with your buyer. Now, keep in mind, the inspector will give you a 75-page report. And for some people, that can be overwhelming. Okay? Particularly if you have new home buyers. Okay? They can often get flustered just by the abundance of information that the inspector put in. So it's up to you as a broker to make them feel a little more comfortable, okay? What you want to discuss with your buyer is, so what's important to you, okay? You're going to have some buyers that insist that everything in the inspection be repaired. Oftentimes, that's going to be a deal breaker. It's just not going to be done in most cases. Again, if a house is built in 1949, you have to say, hey, listen, the house is built in 1949. Most houses in 1949 have had, because some of them are built lower to the ground, they're going to have termite issues. They're going to, as long as the repairs are done, as long as the damage or is dormant, then it's not necessarily a deal breaker. So it's your job to make them feel comfortable with the things in that report. But you want to try to put some of those things, particularly if you find something that is a material fact, it's very important that you disclose that and that you have it repaired, okay? So this is a due diligence repair request, and I put a due diligence repair request in your hands. Okay, so on that page with the pictures, that is a page from an inspection report. Now, they don't match, but I wanted to give you a perspective about how it's done and how important it is that you give detailed information, okay? For example, this says home inspection 2.81. Whenever you go through the home inspection and you see those numbers in the inspection, you might see page 14, 3.18. Whenever you write in the due diligence repair request, you be very, very specific about what items you are talking about in that due diligence repair request, okay? Now, if you feel this is not a very large spot, but if you fill it up, then it's okay to add an additional page or two, whatever it actually takes. But if you look here on number 2, it says release of the inspection report. Buyer does or does not agree to release any inspection reports to the seller. I can't imagine why the buyer not releasing that information would be an advantage for the buyer, okay? Because again, the seller's really not going to negotiate if he has nothing to negotiate with. Now, here's the other thing. If there's a material fact, which could be an advantage to you, if you don't release that information and the deal doesn't go through, he really doesn't have to disclose because he hasn't had any evidence or any documentation saying this material fact needs to be repaired, okay? So that's why documenting specifically and itemizing specifically is very important that it be done. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so we have different types of buyers. Got the old greedy buyer. He wants it all. He wants it all. You know, so I had a property where I listed the property. The sellers were moving to Florida. The buyer wanted everything. He had a 65-inch television attached to the wall. The television was 8 years old. He didn't care. He wanted that. He wanted the couch. So I talked to my seller and I said, okay, well, listen, how old is the television? Well, it's 8 years. I said, well, give it to him. It's 8 years old. It's at 8 years old, 8-year-old television, this day and time is outdated. You know, your dog sleeps on the couch. If that's what it takes to make him feel like he's winning, sell your home, get your $150,000 profit, and go to Florida. Enjoy your life, okay? But you have buyers who want to take it all, okay, to feel like they're winning. You have a scared buyer. Again, when you get that 75-page report, you're 28 years old, this is your first home. So one of the things I will tell you is sometimes if you get a young couple and they bring their family members over to see the property, they scare they will scare the daylights out of them because, you know, officially in their family, they're the experts. They bought 2 homes and they know everything about buying a home. And they will walk through that home and they will just tear the home apart, okay? But I will tell you this, you have to be you have to make your buyers comfortable with the information that you know, okay? You have to talk to them constantly. It's a constant conversation about, hey, you know what? Everything's not a deal breaker. You know, I've lived in a couple of homes, but I've sold a couple of hundred more. So you're given, your knowledge will be a little bit more valuable than that of their parents. But if they ever come through and they bring their parents, it's almost an ego thing. They're gonna shred that thing apart. So you have to constantly reinforce that everything's gonna be okay. Okay? And then you got the buyer who understands and they just wanna make a deal. Okay? They know that they want to get what they can get, but they don't want, because sometimes asking for too much will kill the deal for you. It's an insult sometimes to the seller. Okay, so we're going to talk about filling out the repair request, which is what I showed you there. When you get your inspection report, you want to go item per item. You want to use those numbers that notate specifically what needs to be done, and you want to put that information into the repair request that way. I got to go back, excuse me. Give me one. Here it is. Okay. So what's going to happen is some sellers are going to agree to do the repairs. Some are going to completely decline. If you ask for too much or if your repair requests are unreasonable, they're simply just going to say no. Now, depending upon how much you have invested in due diligence and earnest deposit, if you've given a lot of due diligence and earnest deposit and you want to walk away from the deal, they may be fine with it, okay? So that matters. They may completely decline or they may pay after closing. So I've had situations where an inspection was done and a house needed to be repaired, but the seller did not have a lot of money. So what you do in that estimate, in that situation is you get an estimate from a licensed or certified expert, and they'll give you a quote. Typically, what they will do is they'll honor that quote if you agree to do the work with them. So what you'll do is they'll give you an estimate. They say the roof is $7,500. You take that estimate and you submit it to the attorney's office. And you say to the attorney, the seller would like to pay these out of escrow, which means that after the deal is done, they will let the contractor go in and do the work, and then they'll issue payment to the contractor. Sometimes, and I just had one recently where the attorney's office really doesn't do escrow. So what they decided to do was they'll cut a check and they'll give it to you, the buyer. Once the work is completed and you're satisfied, then you give that check to the buyer. But you're going to find instances where people may not have a lot of money on the seller side, but they want the deal done. Now, does this mean that it needs to be done during the due diligence period? No. What it does mean is that you've agreed to do it, and it's going to be honored after closing. Okay? Agreement to amend. Anything that you decide upon with this agreement sometimes you may have to extend the due date or the settlement date. Sometimes you may have to extend the due diligence date. But whatever has to be done needs to be done in writing, and you may want to put that in agreement to amend. Now, when you look at the inspection report, it's very important that you say, if you're going to have the HVAC system done, you need to put in that due diligence repairs will be done by a licensed HVAC professional. Why? Because you know what? I got a cousin who took HVAC, took a semester of HVAC. I'm sure he can fix it. If you don't be specific and with certain things like structural engineer, do you think you want my cousin to do that? I don't think you do. Roofing. I have an Uncle Tang who's a roofer. He's passed a few houses, but do you want him to do that? I don't think so. So you want to be very, very specific with your wording, especially when it comes to those things. Now, on the other side of that, so sometimes people will take professional certifications and license, and they will do too much in terms of the inspection or the due diligence repair request. For example, there are some things that a handyman can do. Do you need a licensed electrician to change a light bulb? Do you need an electrician to change a light switch? Probably not, okay? Lawn care, do you need a licensed contractor? So those are the things that, you know, be reasonable whenever you do the request. And when you speak to your buyers, you got to help your buyers understand, hey, listen, we don't need a licensed contractor to cut the lawn. We don't need that. Now, they may decide that they want a licensed contractor to install carpet, and that may be okay, because that is something that's kind of, you know, you may feel like a licensed contractor could do it better, right? Or a painter. So there are some jobs that will need to be done in the due diligence process that a handyman can do, and the things that a handyman can do, you may consider letting the handyman do, because you got to remember contractors cost, and the more they do, the more you pay. And the seller now is starting to lose a lot of funds for little things that can be done by someone else, okay? So let's talk about condominiums versus single-family homes. So condominiums typically, and this is not all, but they typically have a different set of rules. With condominiums, typically, you're responsible for your windows, your doors, and what's on the inside, okay? Whenever you get a condominium, you need to contact, and repairs need to be done, you need to contact the HOA. And the HOA will tell you specifically what they handle and what the seller's responsibility is, okay? If there are decayed windows, of course, in most of the situations that I've worked, it was the responsibility of the seller. Water damage to the siding or the roof needs to be repaired, that is a responsibility of the HOA. Now, the HOA may not do the repairs immediately because they kind of have a way of doing it per, not per unit, but per building, okay? So instead of them covering your house, they're going to cover the entire roof if they deem that the repair needs to be done at that time. But what you need from the HOA is a commitment to get the job done, okay? And that's what helps the transaction move forward. A shaky toilet, of course, you know, that belongs to the seller. Improper drain under the sink, broken tile in the kitchen, and Missing closet door, who does that belong to? That belongs to the seller. And those things are minor and they can, be redundant. But if you see anything inside of a condominium or townhome, you want to follow the same process in terms of documentation of what you want. Page 14, item 2-3 needs to be repaired, okay? Everything that, and every assignment that should belong to a licensed professional, you want to make sure you state that. Everything that can be done by a handyman, you may want to speak with your buyer and say, hey, those things can kind of be done, by a handyman, okay? So, we have an HVAC system. It's 17 years old. The vents are rusty. The sound is louder than usual, and it doesn't really cool. What do? Whose responsibility is that? It's going to be the seller's responsibility. That's true. Now, because I said initially that most of the things outside are the responsibility of the HOA, that's not. That is the responsibility of the seller. So I got another question for you. Let's say the fans are rusty, the vents are rusty, it sounds louder than usual, but it cools. But the buyer doesn't really like the age of it. So you give the inspection to the seller, and the seller says, okay, well, let me call Mal Spears' HVAC system, right? So Mal comes out, he takes a look at it, he says, yeah, it's rusty, and it's a little loud, but you know what? It's functioning as intended. What is the most important thing? That it works. So when he decides, he writes that statement saying the fan or the HVAC system is functioning as intended, what do you think the seller's going to say? He's going to say no. He's going to say, well, according to my expert, Mal Spears' HVAC system, the greatest HVAC company in the city, he said it's functioning as intended. And I'm going to take that letter, I'm going to give that to the buyer agent, okay, and say, hey, listen, my seller is declining to do any repairs because it's working. I know, yeah, it's old, but it's working. But what might be a good thing to do considering the age of it that would satisfy the buyer?
Get one of those home warranties.
There you go, man. I say, hey, listen, it's functioning as intended, but Mal Spears also has a home warranty company. So what if I get you a $500 home warranty? Would that make you feel better about the transaction? And oftentimes it does, okay? So that's very important to know. Functioning as intended is a very important thing. Now, this is a good one. So you go to a property, you look around, you see cracks in the seams of the bricks, okay? The cracks are located at the corner of the house. The house is only 4 years old. Do you think that's scary to a new buyer? Absolutely. And guess what? She brought her daddy with her, and her daddy's like, oh, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's going to fall down. So what do you think? How would you handle that situation? So the first thing that you would do, we know it's 4 years old. So typically, the warranty on a foundation is approximately 10 years, right? So we know that we're going to speak to the seller and say, hey, listen, will you contact your home warranty company and let them know that there are cracks in the seams and have them come and look out? What will actually happen is they will send out a structural engineer. That structural engineer will do an evaluation of it and determine if there's any cause for concern. And what I tell people is, and this is actually one of the houses that I sold, In that 10-year period, you make sure that you're always evaluating this. So it kind of turned out that this seam is just poor mortar. It had nothing to do with the actual foundation itself. But to make the buyer feel better, listen, you have a 10-year warranty. Within that 10-year period, you make sure if you have any concerns, you call the warranty company, and they will come out and take a look at it. And I also think that contacting the warranty company initially at the point of transaction is good for the buyer. Why? Because if you call back 4 years later, they have documented evidence that it has been an issue and someone has called for it, right? So that's very important, okay? Anybody have any questions at this time? Okay, so we're going to talk about the agreement to amend. And I should have given you one of these. So it's a 2-page document, and any type of change that you want to put into the contract, you want to put in the agreement to amend contract, okay? So one of the things that is very, very common is if a seller says, man, that's a lot of repairs, I don't want to do any repairs. I tell you what, I'm going to give you $10,000 in lieu of repairs, okay? So what you would then do is put in that document, in lieu of repairs, the sellers have agreed to give a $10,000 seller contribution, okay? Now, what does that mean? That means, look, I'm going to give you these $10,000, but I'm not doing anything else. So even if you find a house and the house has minor things, you should always submit a due diligence repair request. Why? Because it's a negotiation tool that makes the seller nervous. You know, sometimes I may do the inspection report early in the process, and I may not really submit this request until like 5 days out. Why? So what actually happens is typically a transaction could be 35 to 40 days out. 5 days into the deal, the seller may be more inclined to walk away from the deal. Like, I'm not doing it. I'll just put it back on the market. He hasn't invested yet. 30 days on the market, he's thinking, man, don't want to put it back on the market because now I got to put it out another 40 days. I want to be gone. So sometimes I won't give him to, even if I did it early, I'll give it to him closer toward the end of the due diligence period. I'll give him time to do what needs to be done, but I want him to stress a little bit. I want him to kind of think about the time that he already has in the deal because he doesn't want to put it on the market for another 40 days. So he's going to make a decision, okay, so I'm going to do this. I don't like it. I don't want to do nothing, but I'm going to do this, sell it, and I'm going to go ahead and start my acting career in California. See what I'm saying? So understand that that tool is a negotiation tool, and you should use it in the best interest of your buyer, okay? But sometimes the seller may want to increase or reduce the purchase price. He may say, well, I'll give you an additional, I'll reduce it $10,000, okay? So if he says that, then you go to the agreement to amend contract and you put it there. Now, he says, you see all of these things, and he didn't have an opportunity to get everything done, or he didn't have a chance to have somebody. He may call the warranty company and they say, we can't get anybody out to you for the next 2 weeks. Well, due diligence ends in the next 4 days. So what we may have to agree to do is to extend the due diligence period to when the engineer can come out and take a look at the property, okay? and that actually is on the due diligence, the agreement to amend request, and maybe the settlement date. Now, I don't know if everybody knows this, but in the state of North Carolina, if you, the buyer, are making every effort to sell, you have 7 days outside of that closing date. But if there are a lot of repairs that need to be done and the buyer's concerned, you may negotiate that date and say, hey, not sure I want to negotiate or want to close on this date. The inspector is coming in the next 2 weeks. Let's set it out 3 weeks, okay? In order to do that, on the agreement to amend contract is there. Sometimes the seller may want to give seller contribution, okay? And you have to be careful with seller contribution because it depends on the type of loan the actual buyer has. There are some mortgages that you can only receive so much on, but there is a place on the agreement to amend contract that will allow you to increase the seller contribution. Well, and this is what that looks like, actually. This is what the agreement to amend is. It's typically a 2-page document, and if you look at it closely, every change that is needed on your contract is on this 2-page document. So what you would do is once you agree to the terms between the buyer and seller, you have to make sure that you submit this. This becomes a part of the contract. So you make sure that you submit this to the attorney's office, okay? But you also want to contact the mortgage company to let them know, hey, listen, there's been a change in seller contribution. Why? Because when they send over their good faith estimate, it's going to be based on the information that is in the current contract. If there's been a $15,000 adjustment, they need to know, okay? It was the fastest class you've ever been, but I hope it was the most informative class you guys have ever been in. Are there any questions? No? Ask me something. Nah? No?
I got a question. You mentioned, of course, with repairs and requests. I guess could you go into more depth and detail of why a lender may reject a deal if the proceeds are too much or the seller contributions are too high?
Yes, because in some contracts, like FHA contracts, USDA, I guess VA, they have a limit as to how much a seller can contribute. Anything that is above that amount is left on the table. And by left on the table, that means that the buyer just can't have it. So you have to know what type of loan you have. That's why communication with your mortgage company is very, very important. So before you accept $100,000 in seller contribution, you say, oh, wait a minute, let me contact the mortgage company. Now, typically, conventional loans are a little bit better, but you want to speak to your mortgage company and say, hey, listen, the seller wants to offer $100,000 in seller contribution. Is that doable? Is that something that my buyer can do, and will money be left on the table? So communication with all the vendors involved is just extremely important. So.
I got another question as well from Mr. Campbell. A lot of times what I'm seeing a lot of agents just do is when they get their repair request back, they just copy off, 18.1 page 4 and just copy and paste. And then when I present it to my seller, they're kind of confused. I guess if they use the words fix, repair, or replace in front of it, that might help.
Right.
Any kind of suggestion?
Right. Well, the one thing, like I said, whenever you do the due diligence repair request, it's very important that you're specific. It's very important that you identify the professional or non-professional that is to do it, and be specific about what you want. Do you want it fixed or do you want it repaired? There's some things that need to be repaired or replaced. Okay, so be very specific about what your buyer wants. That's something that's very important.
Can I extend on that? So when you put it in the repair addendum, do you put like, say you say 14.1, do you say what it is? Or you just put the number?
No. I
So you
put
mean like 14.1, repair leaky faucet under kitchen sink, or do you write that out too? Or you
Yes.
just put the number down?
Yes.
Because I usually write it out
I
a
put
little bit.
yeah, I put the number down, and so typically you don't want to cut and paste, but the first line in that notation is pretty clear and specific. So, but you want to decide, you want to write that, you want to understand that, you want to make sure that what you're writing is comparable to what's in that report. And you also need to decide, does it need to be repaired? Does it need to be replaced? That's very, very important. So here's the deal. You say that you want the doggy door in the kitchen replaced or repaired. So the seller might say, well, I tell you what, I don't want to really replace the doggy door. It's a little expensive for me to do it. What if I just take that door out and replace it with a standard door with no doggy door? Those are the things that you have to negotiate and that you have to be okay with. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Another question.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Thank
the repair report,
Uh-huh.
you don't, not enough to fill it all, you have more repairs than the lines.
Mm-hmm.
Do you go to the second page, you just write, see page 2, and use a regular piece of paper?
Regular-
Like a regular, or, I'm just,
No, it sounds like you've done this before.
I just wanna make
Sounds
sure.
like you've done this before. Absolutely correct. So it's very obvious that that space may not be enough, right? And it's tight. So you may have to continue on 2, 3, 4 pages, depending upon what the buyer wants. So she's correct. You want to say, see, continued on page 2, continued on page 3, continued on page 4. So that is absolutely correct. Sometimes you have that difficult buyer who wants everything on these 72 pages done. Now, it doesn't make sense to you, and you know that all that doesn't need to be done, but you have a responsibility, no matter how you feel about it, to do what the buyer wants, because it's his house, you work for him, it's your responsibility. Now, in that particular situation, I would not rewrite that that inspection report, but I would put that, maybe I would say something in that section. Buyer is requesting that all repairs in the inspection report are done by a licensed professional, or all the repairs are done and evaluated prior to the end of due diligence, okay? So that's because you have people who are not going to be reasonable and they want it all. So, yeah.
Can we extend on that just a little bit more?
Yeah.
So when you do like page 2, page 3,
Uh-huh.
do you have the buyers and sellers sign each of those pages?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So it's very important, and that's very, very good. They sign those pages. You have the buyer and seller sign those pages because it is a legal document, and you have to make sure that they... Now, I will tell you this. So very recently, I did a house. It was built in 1939. It had a basement. The basement was part cement and part dirt, and there was a moisture issue. So in that property, both companies that I bought in to evaluate it said that it's the highest case of radon that they've had in company history. It's kind of scary, right? So we negotiated with the seller. The seller says, hey, I got a contractor who can do it all. Man, the contractor was so upset. I have a contractor who can do it all. Well, my buyers don't want a contractor. When you say that you have the highest radon level in any property that you've been in, they want experts to come in and do the job. So I had a company, Fresh Air Technology. They came in, they gave an evaluation, and then there's another big company, I can't think of them right now, but they came in. So the larger company, they were just extremely high, you know. But it was a $15,000 job. It was a $15,000 job. They came in and they put in a radon mitigation system, and they had they put this thick plastic on the walls because apparently moisture kind of catalyzes or releases radon in a space like that. So they came in, they put some type of tubes along the bottom of the on the corners. So they did that. Then they put this thick plastic. And so, again, it was an issue because the contractor wanted to do the job. He said, nah, none of that needs to be done. I can do it all for $1,500. So you got one company paying $15,000, charging $15,000. The contractor is saying, who's a friend of the seller, he is a licensed contractor, but he's a friend of the seller. He's saying, I can do it all for $1,500 to $2,500. So, of course, my buyers are opting to go with Fresh Air Technologies. The difference is the contractor was offering a guarantee on the mitigation system, which is some type of tool and some type of air system that sucks it in, for 2.5 years. Fresh Air Technology says we're going to cover this for 25 years to life. So it wasn't even though the sellers did not want to pay it, it wasn't a tough decision to make, because having that warranty on the system that was placed in is extremely important. You got for 25 to 30 years, you can call someone and ask them about it. And sometimes you're going to have to fight for your buyers that way, you know. And I sent out an email to the listing agent, and it wasn't. I said, listen, absolutely not. First of all, I don't see any permits that your contractors pull. I don't see any indication that he's done this particular type of job. Listen, we either get it done by a licensed company that will provide a guarantee, or my buyers are going to walk. But there were things that we did agree to allow the contractor to do, like replace the basement door. So we worked it out. So the contractor is going to do some of the minor stuff, and the Airfresh Technology, they were going to do this huge $15,000 mitigation system. So I called him for repairs, and man, he was livid. And he was like, listen, first of all, I didn't like what you said. I've been in business. I said, sir, it's not personal, okay? I don't know you, okay? You have to understand that I have to negotiate on the best interests of my customer. So anything, boy, he said, so he had to do about $3,000 in work. He says, I ought not do it. I said, listen, sir, I apologize. I don't know you. This wasn't a person. The things I said weren't personal, but you have to understand I have a responsibility to my buyer. I said, if I offended you, I apologize. You know, we can still get the deal done. But you know what? He accepted my apology. He went in, did a great job. My buyers are happy, and you know, you think they weren't happy getting about $18,000 in repairs? They think I'm the greatest salesman alive. Yeah. So, all right. Any more questions?
I was gonna say, how do you prepare your buyers that, of course, when you, not every case, I guess every house is different, as you mentioned, but I guess my question would be is, how do you prepare your buyers about trip charges for specialists, contractors, things of that nature?
Say it again.
Trip charges?
Uh-huh.
I guess, you know,
Oh,
some of these contractors.
yes.
How do you prepare, when do you prepare your clients that may be a potential? Do you do it early
Well,
to scare them, or?
Well, once we get the report and once we take a look at the things that need to be done, so there are, and let's say the roof needs to be repaired. So you want a licensed, certified licensed roofing company to come in and evaluate the property. So what you give them a call, and they come out, they evaluate the property, and they'll say to you, okay, well, I'm going to come out, but it's going to cost you $250. Now, if you agree to let us make the repairs, then we will include that in the process, okay? And so what actually happens if they come in and they find that repairs need to be made, then chances are they're not going to accept that $250 from you because they're going to get the job if you agree and you like them. Now, sometimes you may not even like the company. You may just want to give them that $250, but you got to understand it's still things that happen in the due diligence period. It's in the investigative process. So like with all the other expenses that you paid, you may have to pay. With this mitigation system that I had, a lot of the companies that I called with the radon mitigation system, they were pretty friendly. They didn't want to charge you a lot because they understand that this was a big ticket item. And if they did the job, they got a score. But expect some people, even the HVAC guys, sometimes might come in and charge you a fee. So you have to keep that in mind. You have to communicate that with your buyer. And those are his responsibilities, you know. Listen, if you ever get Mal Spears' HVAC system, drop my name. Maybe it'll cut you a little deal. Maybe it'll cut you a little deal on it, okay? So, yeah. Any more questions? All right, well, listen, everybody understood okay. Well, listen, I'm always available. If you ever need my assistance, if you have a question about this, feel free to contact me, okay? Thank you. All right, and listen, don't use Mal Spears' HVAC system.